Hello everyone, I'm John D. Villarreal and I'm right here at the Carey Business School in downtown Harbor East in the beautiful Baltimore. We had an incredible business conference yesterday. It was on entrepreneurship, civic engagement, and innovative programming. We had people from venture capital here, academics, people from business and local business incubators talking about the business and venture and startup climate in the greater Baltimore area. How do we teach those kinds of entrepreneurship and venture capital skills in the classrooms like here at the great John Hopkins Carey Business School? It was very exciting. This is one of many panels. Please look at all the videos. Please enjoy this great panel coming up right now.
And the success rate is amazing. We did an economic impact study in 2016, and our current graduate companies had a $1.2 billion economic impact on the state of Maryland and $800 million economic impact on the city alone. So that's the power of what you all can do as the entrepreneur, as the professor helping the entrepreneur, and as we, the community.
Jeff?
Hi everyone, how you guys doing?
Good.
So my name is Jeff Cherry. I am the founder of a thing called the Conscious Venture Lab, and Conscious Venture Lab is an accelerator. We're based now in West Baltimore. We are, as far as I know, the only accelerator in West Baltimore. And also the only venture capital fund in West Baltimore. Clearly. We haven't always been there. We moved to West Baltimore just after the Freddie Gray riots in 2015. Prior to that, we were in Columbia, Maryland. And I came here from New York City. I ran a hedge fund prior to that. And all the work that we do is really focus on this notion of, and it's been brought up a lot today, that the purpose of business is not really to create value for shareholders. That's an outcome, but the purpose of business is to create value for society. And if you do a really good job at that, shareholders should always be fairly rewarded. And what we do is try to train entrepreneurs to think about that and to build that into the DNA of their businesses from day one. I was involved in writing a couple of books on this subject, not as the author, but as a consultant for a guy named Raj Sisodia, who was a professor at Babson, the entrepreneurship school there. He wrote a book called Firms of Endearment that I worked on with him for about 2 years, and then Conscious Capitalism that he wrote with John Mackey from Whole Foods. So some folks have asked a question about, can you do good and do well? That's come up a bunch today. I would say, if you do nothing else, if you learn nothing else from today, read Firms of Endearment, read Conscious Capitalism. Raj has just written another book called Everybody Matters. And if you don't believe him, read Larry Fink's last 2 letters to his CEOs, where he's talking about the fact that profit's not enough. You have to be focused on purpose. So that's what we're focused on. I'm new to the ecosystem. One of my first friends here in the ecosystem, one of my other first friends here, and another one, Jim. These guys have really sort of embraced what we're doing. And the thing I love about Baltimore is just that, is that it's more of a collection of assets right now, but we're all working really hard to turn it into an ecosystem to help each other and to build better businesses here in Baltimore. So that's sort of what we do.
Okay, thank you. Awesome. So maybe my first challenge for you both is thinking about what are the main areas of content that you think that we should teach. Meaning that when you have people in your incubators with your experiences, what are the main core content areas that you really need and that maybe in a school we are not so working well yet?
There's nothing, we're doing it perfect.
Thank you, Jim. I agree, Ben.
Well, I will always be the first to be controversial. So, having been, sometimes I say serial entrepreneur, other it's recovering, and I have a 12-step. But I've been there, I've done that, I've started many companies, I've failed, I made money, I lost money, I hold a lot of worthless paper. Okay, so that's a journey. And part of me, and this is the controversial part, says, as good a job as you all are doing, A, you need to burn the business plan, and B, you can teach a whole lot of things, but you cannot teach someone to jump off that cliff, right? So you need to concentrate on the things that you are good at. And the things that you are good at are, yes, you can teach finance, and every entrepreneur needs to know something about finance. And yes, you can teach the basics of marketing, right? And the lessons of what a successful business person needs to know. But you cannot make them do what I did, which was quit my job, leave my husband, sell my car, and start my job all in the same week. You just can't, right? It was a very successful business too, thank you very much. But that's the advice that I would give you, that the business basics, but again, you can't, as Chris was saying earlier, and I caught a lot, that was a great discussion, you can't teach someone to take the risk. You cannot teach them to open a door that isn't there, right? But you can instill them with the confidence to potentially move forward.
Yeah, it's a related piece of advice, I think, about, and I don't know how you teach this, but one of the things, I think that's all true, and one of the things that we're seeing now, because there's such a focus on entrepreneurship in business schools, the thing that we forget, I think, sometimes is that it's not for everybody, right? And I think it's important to at least say that to people. It's not for everyone, right? I heard Gary Vaynerchuk talk once, and he said, what's the biggest mistake you see entrepreneurs make? So the biggest mistake I see them make is they think they're entrepreneurs and they're not.
Yes.
And then when things start to fall apart, Francesca and I were talking about this, things will fall apart all the time. That's the nature of entrepreneurship. If you're not prepared to be okay with that, to fall on your face and pick yourself back up, you said in the last panel, then maybe this is not the thing for you, or maybe the thing for you is to support other entrepreneurs. So I think it's worth bringing that up. I think it's worth talking about that when you're teaching. I also think that you really, if you want to be an entrepreneur, what should you be teaching? You gotta, the whole thing about customers. You know, I'm an old guy. I'm in the venture capital space now. When I was building, I started my first business when I was 26 years old. That was a long time ago, 1986. So I've done this for a long time. I've been CEO for more than 30 years. All right? When I was building my 7 businesses, venture capital was a new customer. That's it. There was no one to go to and ask for money. The only person who asked for money was someone who was going to buy what you had. You know, as Chris said, is somebody willing to buy it. We have to figure that out all the time.
A customer and revenue are cheaper than that VC. Sorry, Chris, that you're going to, right? So we have this myth of venture capital, of the Inc. 5,000 companies, only 5 are venture-backed. I mean, the statistics are crazy, right? So cheaper is concentrating your time on a customer and customer acquisition, but it's also understanding your customer. What did we talk about earlier, which is, validation of the product. So revenue and a customer, spending your time there is cheaper than potentially going after a VC.
And teach someone how to find customers.
Well, right, you can teach them how to,
That's the thing I think focused on.
You asked, what are we doing in our incubator? There was a moment, again, I think a little crazy, but I was going to go to Home Depot and buy a door. And I was going to prop the door up. And then I was going to sit on the other side, right? But I was going to make our entrepreneurs knock on the door and see if they could get by me to get to the person they really needed to talk to. Now think about that, right? It's role playing, but it's amazing. How do you actually get by the admin assistant? How do you get by the person that answers the phone to get in to see Chris, who's the guy with the money? Now think about that. Why aren't we doing that?
LinkedIn doesn't work.
No.
I have so many LinkedIn connections.
I have 4,000 LinkedIn friends.
I know.
So you have one more now.
Yeah, right, and
4,000
many more out here.
And all you people.
Yeah, so Reggie Fils-Aimé, who's the founder of Nintendo, I like reached out because he's somebody that pops up for me to connect to. He didn't. And now he's retired.
Okay, excellent. So after I hear you talking, I think, man, I'm doing everything wrong. So thank you for all your insight. That's excellent. Maybe I can ask you, for giving us a little bit more input on how we teach. How can we say to a student who is scared, who is like very timid and has no intention for going and asking something about asking other people what people think about, but they had their own idea. How we teach that? How we teach that willing to jump and to ask to people, even when we know that that's not for everybody. So how is that balance, or how can you see that being worked with your
Again, controversial, but it's not for everyone. And it's really hard, right? So you gotta remember that. And so you can bring in speakers, I think, that have been there and done that, and have them personally go through their journey and have students ask questions and understand what it took, or when was the aha moment. For example, I was working for someone else, very entrepreneurially, and another person that we had hired, I worked for an ad agency, we were doing the head sportswear catalog, we were in Vermont. She was a wonderful young fashion photographer, and on location, the two of us were like, wait a minute, we're doing this for somebody else, and they're making all the money. I could do this, you could do that. And we said, okay. But we worked really hard for the other people until we knew that it was that right moment that we were going to do this. So I think you have to talk to people, or have people come and talk and tell the stories about how they did it while you're teaching all the basics.
Yeah, I want to go back to something that was talked about in the earlier panel too, the diversity panel, about mindset, right? We don't spend enough time on that, I think, in the classroom. About, so what sort of, if you want to be in this business, what is it really going to take from a mindset? So it was talked a little bit about on that panel about female and minority entrepreneurs and holding back and not living into their power, and that's something we need to work on. And I think that's something that we don't teach, right? We don't talk about enough in business school. So some of this could be, I mean, even if you are built that way, if you are built to be an entrepreneur, there is a certain mindset that you have to get your head around. The thing I was talking about is, if you are, and this might be hard for some graduate students, but if you are, like I was, 26-year-old graduate student, and I had an idea, my mindset was, what do I have to lose?
Well, right.
I'm young, I'm single. If the thing fails completely, craps out, so what? But I had that mindset for some reason. I don't know where it came from.
But you believed in yourself.
I
and
did.
You knew that you would be able to find another job and move forward, and that this wasn't going to kill you.
Right, but and it's worth talking about that. If you're going to business school, it's worth sort of bringing forth that there is a mindset to this business, and it's not going to kill you. If it doesn't work, you should lean into your power. All those things were talked about on that panel, I think, are really important in terms of other things that we could be bringing to students in a business school setting.
Sure, excellent point. And actually, having that too, nowadays what we most have is that teaching that this entrepreneurial mindset that can be used in any area. Right. So it's not just for you being an next Steve Jobs, but you can have that entrepreneurial mindset looking at one field and finding anything new in any area of your life.
Think about how important
That is in larger companies too, right? That entrepreneurial mindset at a T. Rowe Price, where they're risk averse in many ways, and they know what they're doing. They've been there, they've done that. They're a large corporation. They cannot innovate, but if other directed thinkers and innovative thinkers are in their midst and running their departments, isn't that amazing? And aren't we going to see more fintech than we've ever seen before? And these companies, the bigger ones, have the opportunity to do that. So teaching that mindset and some of those skills, great thing to listen to today on NPR. I can't remember, it was about 2 o'clock. But this young man gave a TED talk about rejection therapy. And he said, it was really perfect. He said he put himself on a 100-day challenge and that he was going to go do something every single day of those 100 days and potentially get rejected. And how was he going to live through that? And it was amazing, you know, and the first day he ran away and hid.
Yeah.
And then each subsequent day he went out and
Yeah, it's a great, actually, I read about that too, it's a great article on 100 Days of No's.
Yeah.
Getting no for 100 days.
Getting no, right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, look, I think that you're right, that entrepreneurial mindset, it's valuable no matter what you're going to do in life. You know, a book from 1,000 years ago, In Search of Excellence, Tom Peters always said, you know, how many second lieutenants are there in the Pentagon? And the guys that get things done are the second lieutenants who think that they're generals. They just don't know it. They don't know that they're not. But they go around getting things done because they're not wedded to someone else's vision of what it means to be them. They have an entrepreneurial mindset and they get things done. And they're the people that everyone relies on to get things done. So it's valuable no matter what you're doing.
But that makes me think, I had a great role model. My dad was an entrepreneur and he was amazing. But he used to look at me even when I was little, before he went off on the entrepreneurial journey. And he used to look at me and say, do you want to be it or do you want to do it? And I was like, wait a minute, yeah. A lot of people who think about entrepreneurship want to be it. They just want to be that entrepreneur. You got to do it before you can be it. You have to do it. You can't just say that's what I want. You have to be willing to do all the hard things that Jeff has done through the years and all the other great entrepreneurs. You have to be willing to do it. Scrub the floors, but also put on the tie right after you scrub the floor to go ask the guy, you know, if he'll buy your product. Yeah.
I had an ex-girlfriend who used to say, I'm amazed that you come out of the house looking so good. You only have like 3 jackets and 2 pair of pants. But every week you come out looking like a different guy. Like, well, that's what it takes. You'll fake it till you make it, right?
But that takes me to a great story. So I worked in computer gaming for almost 25 years, and one of the first game companies I went to was called Microprose. It was right here in Hunt Valley, and it was Sid Meier and Bill Staley, and they started in 1982, and I didn't join until 1989. But the best story, we're talking about entrepreneurs. They said, after meeting, that, you know, Bill said, you know, I'm gonna beat you because I'm a fighter pilot, and they were playing a coin-op game, and it was a fighter game back in 1982 in Las Vegas, and they were on a trip. Anyway, long story short, Bill was winning, the fighter pilot, and Sid, the little nerd, came along and said, yeah, okay, and he beat him. And when Bill said, how'd you do that? He said, oh, I just read the algorithm, right? So then Bill said, can you make those? He said, yeah. He said, well, if you can, I can sell them. Well, then fast forward, so they both decided they were gonna do that. And they had a product, and they bought up all the baggies out of the Giant in Cockeysville because they shoved the 5 1/4-inch discs in there. And Bill would go knock on Radio Shack and say, you want to buy F-15 Strike Eagle? And they would say, no. And he did that, and he kept getting no. So finally he went home, he got his wife, he got his brother, he got his son, he got Sid, and they would call Radio Shack and say, do you have F-15 Strike Eagle? And the guy would say, no. And they did that for about 3 or 4 days, and then about 5 days later, Bill knocked on the door again and said, I have this product, it's called F-15 Strike Eagle, you want to buy it? Damn if they didn't. And damn if that isn't and wasn't for a long time one of the 3 largest gaming companies around, right?
You gotta do it.
You gotta do it.
Wow, excellent story. I'm amazed. Let me ask you something else. We have been talking about this entrepreneurial mindset, which is very important. Let's talk about something else that is the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And here I can see that you have one that is very, very active and excellent. How do you think that we can make the connection between the different elements of the ecosystem more effective? Meaning that we have now the VCs, the incubator, the university, and people who have their own small business. How can we make this more effective overall?
I'll start with that because we've been working on something here in Baltimore. A bunch of us have come together through Deb's leadership, and then we've extended that to a bunch of other people, Entrepreneurship Support Organization, trying to get together to think about how can we move from going from a collection of assets to a real ecosystem. One of the ideas that we've been kicking around a lot lately, where the universities might play an interesting role, is almost this notion of having an entrepreneurial Sherpa, right? Where someone who's in charge of taking an entrepreneur and saying, okay, let's understand where you are, look at your business, is it an idea, have you got any customers yet, have you had any traction, have you talked to anyone, understanding that business on a basic level, and then saying, okay, I know where to take you. And I'm going to take you by the hand to see, you're going to go see Deb first, or you're going to go see Chris, or you're going to go see Jeff, or whoever it is, you're going to go to Impact Hub. I'm going to put you in the right place at the right time. They're going to see you because I am the Sherpa, that's my job. That's my job within the ecosystem. So I think that the universities might be able to play that role. It's hard for us individually to play a role because we have our day jobs that we're trying to do those things. But we do need somebody, I think, who understands the ecosystem as a whole, can work with entrepreneurs to say, I know where to plug you in, and then to be their guide to the next thing, right? Because we're all trying to do it, but we need that connective tissue. I know Chris, so if I have a company that I think is valuable, it would be in the Propel Fund, I can just pick up the phone and call him. But we all can't be expected to do that all the time. And it would be great if there was an infrastructure in place that helped us do that.
I agree 100%.
I think the universities could really bring that together because I'll talk to anybody. Somebody calls me, someone calls out of the blue, somebody recommends, I will talk to you. And honestly, if you're not a good fit for ETC, I will try and find the right place for you, right? It's like the Miracle on 34th Street Santa. If I don't have it at Macy's, I'm gonna send you to Gimbel's, because if you're not successful, I'm not successful, right? So if you come to me and you have something that has a conscious outcome, I'm gonna send you to Jeff first. Now, if you like my location, if you like, whatever, because it's near your house, if for whatever reason that's it, that's fine. But I've done my job, which is to try and tell you that you're gonna be better at Fast Forward. You're gonna, because you have something in the life sciences. You're gonna be better with Jeff. You'll be better even going to see TU, right? There's Jan Baum, but going to Towson because they have an ed tech focus, right? So having someone other than us, again, who has a full-time job, looking at the stage of the company, your idea stage, you still have a full-time job. Well, maybe ETC is right for you because we run a program called Pioneer. 9 weeks at night, no seed funding, you get a full-time job, we feed you and we find out if you suck or your idea sucks and keep your job. So, and if you know that program exists, that's what you do. But if somebody's farther along and you know that, one of the other, how about the moms as entrepreneurs? They have nanny service, right? So it's a woman and she's got kids and has this big idea. No, that's where you're going to send her because they have a daycare.
Structure to that would be great, right?
Right.
Now we're doing it because we know each other, and there's people I don't know, but not as well connected to. So having some structure around that would be interesting. I think that's a role that the universities might be able to at least help with.
Yeah, excellent. I think so too, and I think that's an excellent idea. Let me ask you a little bit about what's going to happen next. Let me see what is your idea. I can see that I'm sure that you have very good ideas. What do you see being the next future challenge for entrepreneurship in general? So if you think about incubators and what are the hotspot of what's going to be our next big thing that young people will be looking for? What's their insights?
It's a really hard and interesting question. I think it goes back to the last panel with what they were talking about with AI and machine learning and what's happening in that industry. And with those technologies, excuse me, but you're right, not an industry, with those technologies, and how they're going to disrupt lots of other industries, those technologies. Someone said, if you have children and they're going to college now, what would you tell them to study? And I'm like, I don't know. I really don't know, because everything's changing so quickly. I happen to think that we're farther along in the AI path than the gentleman on the last panel. So I think that the next thing is going to be what happens with those technologies. What happens with artificial intelligence? We had a guy, I belong to help run an entrepreneurship group called Shift Society, and we meet once a month, and we had the last 2 times we had folks come in and talk about AI. And one of the most fascinating and terrifying things I heard was the guy said, so if you talk to the guys that are really in the AI industry, guys at MIT, and they're talking about the development of artificial superintelligence, what does that mean? So he said, think about trying to explain the way Netflix works to an ant. That's how far beyond our ability to comprehend is artificial superintelligence going to be. So what's next in a world like that? Who the hell knows? I have no idea.
I don't know that I can even answer the question. I'll just give you some thoughts. But what's interesting to me is within the last couple of years in running the accelerator that we do, we've seen, I think, a flat line in just software. Chris and I were talking about this the other day. Anybody with apps, you don't need apps anymore. You really don't. I mean, you just need cloud, web-based browser, right? So that's all kind of gone away, and we all thought that was just so cool. And then, software as a service, or coming up with a new software, or challenging. Now what we're seeing, which is really interesting, is products that are being completely redesigned, and hard products and re-engineered with a technology bent, right? And so whereas we used to just be incubator focused on technology, now you better have a makerspace, or you better have manufacturing tied right into there, because we're seeing people rethinking how and what we do with individual products. I mean, we got a company coming through our accelerator program, and they have a waterless car wash. Think about that. What is that going to do for the environment? In the 6 weeks that they've been in the program, because IMEC can give me metrics and all that kind of stuff, they've saved over 6,000 gallons of water just in the process of understanding. So how do you think in those kinds of terms what's happening? And I don't think I answered your question, but we have to be open to all of that and where we are in history.
No, I want to piggyback on that, because that's a really, really excellent point. I was thinking about this. So what are we seeing that's next too? So I talked to a few people, and some people know this, but last summer I was involved in an accelerator that was run by the Vatican. And the reason that they set up this accelerator, the Pope wrote an encyclical, Laudato Si, which is about care for our common home, thinking about how we all have an impact on the environment and what's it going to do to us. So this is the only home we've got, so how do we take care of it? So they did an accelerator which was all about green tech and environmental companies, which was really interesting, and it was fun, and we did a good job. And now they've extended that. And last year, the Laudato Si Challenge was about forced migration. Finding companies that are dealing with issues of forced migration. And when you just sort of see it on his face, you're like, I'm not really sure. What does that mean? What are we going to get? But then we started to identify companies that were working on that space, going into migrant camps and fintech associated with that, and environmental issues associated with that, and everything from trying to alleviate war to begin with, because that's the biggest driver of migrations, forced migration. So I think that's one of the things. The technology side is one, but there are really, really big problems in the world, and there are lots of people out there that are trying to solve them through through a commercial, infrastructure or lens that are going to be some of the most interesting things I think we see in the future.
And the other thing that I would add to that, and believe me, we're not going to go down this rabbit hole, but the U.S. used to be #1 in innovation, right? And we really pat ourselves on the back as being a nation of entrepreneurs. Columbus probably was, one of the first, right? Get on a ship and I'll see you, Who knows what's on the other side? Well, we are not that first world country anymore. There's many, many things happening against us. And yet, if you look, it's a global economy. It is a round world. And there are things happening in places that you would never even think about with technologies, and small advances in technologies that are transforming not just how we eat and what we think and how you exchange money, right? And some of these crazy big ideas are coming from places other than here, and we need to be thinking about that.
Excellent, thank you both. I want to open you all also who wants to ask questions. Yes, please.
Hi, thanks for your talk, and thanks for the point too on identifying students that might not be entrepreneurs. Before I started teaching innovation entrepreneurship, I taught physical therapists and I taught science students. And I'm kind of curious that why do you think it's controversial that we might have to tell students that they're not going to be entrepreneurs? Because really we do that in every other field. Like you might not pass your GREs, or you might not have a grade point average to be a physical therapist or an accountant or an engineer. It is really the question, and if somebody has an answer to my question, how do we identify those students that should be entrepreneurs? You brought up America's standing in innovation entrepreneurship, which the Gallup group has done, and our students are taking the Entrepreneurial Strengths Finder. But how do we create an opportunity in those years students are in school to identify who's an entrepreneur, just like we do who's going to be a physician, who's going to be an engineer?
Make them start a company. I mean, it sounds a little silly, but even if you gave them monopoly cash, right? What if you took the class and I'm making this shit up as we go, but what if you separated the class into cohorts, gave them each, $10,000 worth of monopoly, and had them come up with an idea, and throughout the whole semester, which one of them actually, I don't know. I don't know, but you could do that.
Right, because failure would be okay.
Failure would be okay, and then you would find out, even in that cohort group, which one of them was rising to CEO level, which one of them wasn't. You'd have to put some matrix in there and understand how the cash was coming back and forth, and were they able to sell or weren't. I don't know. You guys are the professors, but you could take an entire semester and have them create a company, give them the cash, and say, okay.
I don't think that's a crazy idea. I think that the social innovation fellows at Maryland, I think that's essentially what you guys do, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I have ideas. So I'll share what I did actually this semester with my class. I'm teaching a dual listed class through our College of Behavioral and Social Science and our public policy class, and this will stay in this room. But I showed two videos I showed two videos off YouTube that were like 90 seconds long, just that define social entrepreneurship and innovation. And I said, if you're not willing to take risks, drop this class. Exactly. If you're not creative, drop this class. If you're not okay with failure, drop this class. I just spent my whole first class period like really saying this class is going to be difficult. And then I pretty much gave them an impossible assignment in the first week with very little parameters, and it was super ambiguous. And I said, don't email me, figure it out. And my class went from 40 students enrolled to 22. And my students said, like, no professor ever tells us to drop the class. And I said, well, it's not going to be a good experience for the other students in my class if there's a freeloader in their group and someone who doesn't want to be here, you know. So I just make it really clear, like, you have to be comfortable falling on your face if you are going to be successful with this class.
I want to say this has come up a couple of times today in private conversation in here about failure, how to get used to failure, all that sort of stuff. And well, I studied architecture. I have an architecture degree. I saw an architectural firm. In architecture school, both undergrad and graduate school, purposefully, they give you more work than you can ever possibly do. And the timelines are insane. That's why architects are always up in the middle of the night. They do it on purpose. And the reason is you have to get used to failing. You're never, we always say in architecture is everybody finishes but no one ever gets done, right? You never get to the end, right? Would you even try? So the whole curriculum is set up so that when you get out, you're comfortable with this, with ambiguity of not getting things done, failing, so.
But it's also like being an engineer, right? Engineers are truly taught to solve problems, right? You go in there and it's like, here's a piece of paper, here's the problem, you figure out how you solve this problem, and that is really, really interesting, right? That works as you think through entrepreneurship.
There's a question she has.
Just kind of going off of your question on the other side of the room. So the way the University of Tampa simulated, like if somebody's cut out to be an entrepreneur, is for your capstone they set up a draft pick, kind of like NFL, and everybody pitched off an idea. Top 4 were picked, and then you got to hand select who you wanted on your team. And you had 4 months to build a functioning business and pitch it off, and we brought in local community investors. And so the team that actually won the competition, the investor didn't buy in on their business, but they bought in on another business that didn't necessarily win the in-class pitch competition, but a business that had more potential. And so even if that was kind of the framework that they tried to interpret, you know, whether somebody was, maybe they weren't cut out for their particular idea, but it was the best way to throw everybody into the thick of things in 4 months to figure out this is what it's like in real life. You have to come up with an idea, you have to build a team. There was a free trade period, so if somebody wasn't performing on your team, you could put them up for free. They weren't performing, so yeah, just a fun idea.
Yeah, either way, it doesn't matter. Okay. So a couple of things. One quick comment. I want to sort of have a comment question. I don't think you can teach entrepreneurship. I think you can teach entrepreneurship skills. I think you can teach a lot of knowledge, but ultimately, you're either going to want to take that jump or not. Like entrepreneurship's really hot right now, and everybody wants to be Gary Vee or whatever. They want to be the next star, but they don't want to do the hard work. I mean, it's like, hey, if I can get funded $10 million before I graduate, you know, then yeah, I'll do it. But the problem is, particularly a place like this, a lot of people are doctors or they're lawyers or they're used to making big money. Well, the real rubber's going to hit the road when you go out there and you decide like you're going to have to take 50 grand in credit card debt, and you're going to have to skip all these meetings, and you're going to have to, you know, mortgage a house. Then we'll see if you're an entrepreneur. You know, so that's just one comment I would make. The other thing about Baltimore, I think that and social stuff, I think all of it comes back to, are you adding value? If you're trying to just do a cause for this, that, whatever, it comes back to, can you reach the broadest audience possible? Can you include everybody? And can you add value? And I think it comes to deal flow. If you have deal flow, then the money will come, the businesses will come. And so it's all about how do you get that deal flow, which again gets back to the entrepreneurs. So people have to be ready to jump in and just dive in there. And I think it's also venture and incubators being open to different types of deals. They don't all have to be home runs. They don't have to do a 10X. Now that's also dealing with your LPs and what they expect. But I think that if you widen that net up, and I think that's where incubators also are very important now, because when I was in the Valley, venture funds were getting so big that you needed incubators to kind of step up because the amount of capital that you needed to deploy per deal was just crazy. And so the incubators and you know, Band of Angels and US Angels, those kind of groups kind of stepped in where Old Venture was. So I just want your reaction to that type of commentary.
That's a lot to unpack.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not, so what's my reaction? If you're gonna be in the venture space, you gotta make money, right? I mean, everything doesn't have to be 10x, but we gotta return the capital to our investors. We have a way to think about that we believe that companies that operate with a stakeholder mindset as opposed to a shareholder mindset are gonna be the best managed companies. I don't believe in this idea, actually, can you do good and do well at the same time is the wrong question. The question, the sentiment is, if you're not doing good, you're going to be much less likely to do well in the future. That's where we're going as a society. So I don't know if that responds to what you were asking. I'm not really sure.
No, that's definitely one part of that. That's fair enough. I think my biggest interest is how to get the Baltimore sort of entrepreneur venture ecosystem going. I think that what that was most interested in that and what you guys were talking about, and I think that my inclination is it's all about deal flow. You've got to get that deal flow, which goes back to who's a real entrepreneur, who's really going to step up and step into that. And it just it's got to. I think it's got to be more broad based than just these kind of deals. You know.
You know, I think that I don't think that we have a problem with deal flow. I think we need some successes. We need some wins, right? We need some really dedicated wins that we can point to in Baltimore, and then because there's lots of things, there's lots of action here. There's lots of things going on. I don't know, Chris, you have any?
I have a really strong opinion. We need more advertising.coms that then spin off millennial medias. We need more successes like Under Armour that then spin off,
Yeah.
the barbecue chain. And people will take money, they grow a big company, and then they go to Florida and retire. We need them to build big companies and then invest in the people they worked with to get the next generation of early stage venture companies here, so the money stays here and we build entrepreneurs with that money and that experience. And that's why Boston and New York and Silicon Valley do so well, because they recycle the people and the money into the next big idea. We take our money and we go to Florida and we swim the beach.
Hey,
Yeah, some of the cashed outs do that. They do, as opposed to staying here and reinvesting. But we have had some. You mentioned Millennial and Ad.com and Laureate and Connections Academy and things like that. But awful lot of big drug company successes here too. And some that are still on the way. So it happens. It's just that they do tend to say, "See ya, I got my money, and what do you want to be in?" Yeah.
I have the unfortunate circumstance to conclude our panel here. But with that, I actually am going to hand it over to Susanna to present a brief video about USOSPI. And then shortly after that, our Associate Dean for Admissions and Programs to give our final acknowledgments and thank yous to our staff and colleagues. Thank you so much.
How amazing was that? That was a great panel, and I want to get your comments below. You tell me what you thought about that, and let's get some feedback and dialogue going about this. Now, stay tuned for the other great videos that I have on this entire conference. Please check those out in the video description below on YouTube. Don't forget to rate this video up. Also, please comment below and post it on your social media sites. My name is John D. Villarreal, and I will see you next time.